I've been saying for some time that you can't look at this as strictly a corporate governance story. It really does go to his state of mind, I guess, and by his own admission, he's grappled with some issues involving sleep loss. He's described himself as possibly being somewhere on the bipolar spectrum. So I think and I'm not a psychologist, but I think you do have to look at some of these issues here and how that fits into running several big companies like this. I think this interview certainly shows that the Times interview was not a one-off situation. He displayed virtually all the same qualities here, which he did there, which included, number one, impulsiveness, a decision to do something like this. I mean, I haven't talked to them all, but I can virtually guarantee that no public relations advisor encouraged him to do something like this. Secondly, this somewhat grandiose vision of what he's up to, both now talking about another visionary air travel kind of thing, but also talking about the need to get off fossil fuels. That's his big mission. And then high level of emotionality. Did he cry in the Times interview? Didn't he? I mean, he clearly is very emotional about this, and if he isn't crying, he's coming very, very close to it, all on public display. This is not the behavior of a conventional CEO by any stretch of the imagination, and you can see why. I mean, the stock has plunged after the Times interview.
He's an unconventional CEO, Jim. We know that. He always has been, and that is why so many people are attracted to him.
Yes,
so,
and
I guess the line is, where does unconventional cross a line to erratic and/or not in the best interest of shareholders?
Well, obviously that's a key question. I think one of the questions is, has this behavior been intensifying in recent years? I don't recall Elon Musk publicly behaving like this 2 years ago. Something seems to be changing. The pressure seems to be ratcheting up. His sleeplessness is ratcheting up. The amount of time he's spending on the job. I said before, he needs a vacation, and I don't mean a couple of days at Burning Man. That is not the answer. And he needs someone to help him, but people are leaving. And even though he says, oh, I'd happily hand this over to somebody else, nobody else ever passes muster. That's another classic example of someone who has to have control and can't effectively delegate. These are issues investors have to consider. The irony to me is he's all upset about the short sellers. He feels they're trying to undermine him. His behavior is completely playing into the hands of the short sellers. Again, the stock went down after the Times interview. The stock is down again today. Whether you or I think that this is too unconventional, clearly investors are worried about this. And his behavior is only intensifying their anxiety.
Are you surprised we haven't heard, I mean, it's still early, I guess, but we haven't heard more about this from the board? Or about this overall dynamic we've seen over the last month or two?
Well, can you imagine being on this board?
What do you do?
I mean, I don't know what you do. I mean, they've been trying to clamp down on the board and keep them from talking. I do know enough to know that they've tried. They've tried to stop him from tweeting. They've tried to stop him from doing things like this particular entertainment stunt. It doesn't seem to have any effect at all. But board members have an obligation to the shareholders. He's a major shareholder as well. They can't just quit. I mean, that could damage the company. I think they do have an obligation to stay in there and do what they can. It does look at the moment that there's not a whole lot they're able to do.
Listen, we can look at the stock price as a reflection of people's confidence, but the bonds may be a better reflection. They're at the highest level we've seen. The 10-year, certainly the 2025 bond, Jim, is 8.892% yield now. I think it's about 83 cents on the dollar. At what point does this become a financial story again, in part because of moves like that?
Well, I think it is a financial story. If you look at the stock chart in recent months, pegged to a lot of this behavior on his part, it tells a pretty clear story. And I think, one reason people are so gripped by the whole story is that this vision of his is so appealing. People love the cars. People love the idea of a greener planet. There are plenty of people, including me, cheering him on. I would love to see him succeed in all this. And it's tragic to see that the biggest obstacle at the moment seems to be his own whims and personality that he needs to somehow get a grip on.
By the way, shares didn't really crater today until the 8K was dropped, that the chief accounting officer has resigned. And then the Bloomberg headline that the HR chief will not return from a leave of absence. So that the executive rotation is sort of what got
well, yes,
investors
but I don't
today.
think they're unrelated. You know, why are people leaving? Why are people, you know, having difficulty working in this environment? Well, do you have to look very far?
You pointed out the chief accounting officer joined the day before the tweet, the go private tweet, the day before.
And as far as I know, it was completely blindsided by it. I don't think, you know, Elon Musk is an easy person to work for, and that is not unrelated to the same personality characteristics that he's displaying in his interviews with the media now.
Jim, it's a fascinating story, at the very least, and one we certainly will continue to follow.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and again, looking at the board, you don't want to curb his unconventional visionary impulses. At the same time, you don't want to see him self-destruct. How do you thread that needle? Again, it's going to be fascinating to watch. I hope they succeed.